Hi, I'm Tony Bowen, and welcome to my monthly series on modeling a Kato E-8. This first month, I'm going to give you a little just background history and kind of some basic detail parts of what I hope to accomplish in my monthly series. If you've been following my channel, many of you may know I model the Rock Island, and usually set right about 1950 to about 1959. Now, the Rock Island Railroad itself had a lot of E units, and not only did it have a lot of E units, but every paint scheme imaginable under the rainbow you could think of. Well, in my case, I'm narrowing it down a little bit. The original Rock Island E units, they took delivery in 1949 until about 1953. And so there was originally 13 of them in that order. Now, they did end up with 14 of them. There was kind of a tragedy. There was an E6A, number 627, that was in a bad accident. It was not that old of a locomotive, so it went into EMD. When it came back from EMD, it was rebuilt into 656, an E8 that the Rock Island took. So essentially that engine got a new life. Started off as an E6A, had a lot of structural damage, all that, but when the railroad received it back, it became an E8 for the railroad. From E units 657 on to about 620, all of those are ex-Union Pacific locomotives. Some of them were A units, some of them were also B units. The original units that I'm modeling are just the A units because the original order, the Rock Island, didn't have any B units. They only stuck with A units and then would lash them up with either E7s and that. So you can see quite a variety of lash ups of a E6, maybe an E7 B unit, and then another E8 A unit. And that's one of the reasons I thought I don't have any E8s on the layout, and I would love to kind of have a variety. So if I want to model a passenger train, I could have an E6 and an E7 and an E8 in some kind of fashion in there. So one of the things that I started looking at was the paint scheme. The original paint scheme that the Rock Island had was a maroon and crimson and had the striping and had kind of at the end of it kind of a whitish or off-white. Well, that didn't last very long before the railroad realized that got dirty real quick. And so a lot of those E units went right back to get painted into a silver so it matched the passenger cars real well. So one of the resources I happen to have is a Rock Island locomotive diagram book. And so I thought, well, I'm going to pick out a locomotive I want to model, an original Rock Island locomotive. So I started looking, and sure enough, here I'm finding some E-8As, and this just happens to be the series of 644 all the way to 649. And as I looked at it, I thought, okay, it's more on the simplistic rocket scheme, where the back portion of it would have been silver with just some simplified TA lettering that would say Rock Island. The front would be just the solid maroon and then have kind of what they call the cigar banding. Sometimes it also had another band right here. And I thought, that's kind of nice. But I really would like to do that paint scheme someday on a set of E7s where I have the A unit painted like this and the B unit is just solid silver. So I thought, maybe that's not the paint scheme for me. So I'm deciding I'm going to do just the solid maroon. So one thing I do have to do in the solid maroon is a lot of the portal windows on E8s would be filled in. So I thought, well, that's okay. If I'm modeling my own, I'll fill in the portal windows. The other thing I need to keep in mind is the Rock Island had no dynamic brakes on their E units. The Kato units that I'm modeling come with that dynamic brake fan. So I'm going to have to get rid of that also as part of my build. So this will be something that I will continue to reference along with this Rock Island diesel locomotive book. This copy here is my original copy. I've had this since about 4th grade. Needless to say, with the cover and that, it has definitely been well loved. I'll put it that way. I have another brand new copy that I picked up a couple years ago at a train show. It's still sealed up. I've yet to open it yet because I figure until this one starts falling too far apart that I can't use anymore, this is going to be my reference guide. So both of these materials will be ones that I will continue to reference. So that's a little history of the locomotive. let's go over to my workbench and I'll kind of show you what I have so far to start this project. All right. Anytime I start a build project, I always like having kind of a tray of all the things I might need. So obviously I already have the Kato E-8 kind of in its cradle, and I started going through my detail parts. I feel very fortunate because I was able to pick up a lot of BLMA parts several years ago, and so I didn't have to go right out and buy a bunch of new parts. Instead, I've got some from past projects and some remaining ones that I can use for this project. Then there was a few things I had to order, like the intake grills that'll go along the side later on in this project. I don't know what it is, but I used to find these readily available, and now it's very scarce. Like if I find them on eBay or if I see them on a train show, I'll pick them up. And they're not that expensive. $375, but I don't know if it's a case that the manufacturer, Plano model products, if they produce so many and then they just stop making them. So when I see them, I pick them up for a job like this. And then something that's kind of new, I've not used these parts until a recent project, is some from KV models. This first one here, when I have to get rid of that dynamic fan up here on it, they've already created kind of a dynamic plate cover that I will be able to, once I have that filed down, just put right over. So that's kind of nice. Comes with two of them. The other thing in the model that I am building is that it has a couple of its portal windows already blanked out. It keeps the first one and it keeps the last one, but the two center ones are gone. And so KV Models also has kind of the blank patch panels that fit right in there. Now I still have to do a little sanding and filing so that when I go to put those in place, they'll lay nice and flat, but they've taken a little of that effort out. Before I've used Squadron Green modeler's putty, so I'm kind of excited to use this. The other thing that's kind of neat is if I had some of those panels that would need the sand hatches, like here, well, they've already come with them. So that's kind of a neat thing. And the last thing, and this will be way into the project before I can use this, but I used this for another project just a few weeks ago for another E-unit, is the twin beam seal headlights for both the upper and lower headlight housing. And it's a pretty small piece, but I'll tell you, having that piece in there and then seeing that lit where you get that twin seal beam headlight effect really adds that little extra to the model. And so those are just a few of the basic detail parts. If I get more specific with some of the BLMA parts, a lot of these, when we're looking at MU hoses, the Ultimate E-unit dress-up kit, a lot of that will be for the handrails, the cab shades, the backup mirrors and that. The tin plate, that's always a good one. Train line, airline hoses. This one I don't happen to have one, but I'm going to need to order the horn that goes on there so I have the correct horn on the cab. The cut lever at the back. This is a freight one, but I do have some locomotive ones, so I just put that in there to remind me, hey, I'm going to need to have a cut lever, but I'll need a locomotive one as opposed to a freight car one. And then obviously some lift rings. And so those are a few of the BLMA parts. The other thing that's nice is it's like the E-unit and F-unit dress-up kit. Even though BLMA doesn't make that anymore, even Gold Medal Models has a nice E-unit and F-unit dress-up kit that I can use, and that may be something that potentially I will also have to order. So when I take a closer look at the model, and I'll just pull that out right there for a second, and I look at the prototype that I'm planning on modeling, there's a few other detail parts that I can see that I'm going to need. Like I'm going to need the firecracker antenna. It does have the little walkway there, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to have those grabs on the nose and then also up above the cab and coming down on each side of the nose. It does not look like that it had anything different on the number boards, so those will be pretty easy to take care of. And as you can see, it's a pretty basic paint scheme with the portal window there, the herald there, blanked out portal, sand hatch back here, and then the other portal window. I will have to do some modifications of cutting off some of the skirting and then making it look like those tanks kind of drop down a little bit. In this one, it's a little hard to tell. Some of the trucks on them were silver, some were black, and with this caption having a little bit of steam there, but on the back being a little darker, I'm more apt to think that they're probably black trucks. But that's one of those things that I will definitely continue to do the research. A few other detail parts I want to make sure that I have is obviously the wipers, MU plug there for the nose. I can see that it definitely has the twin seal beam headlights on it. And so, paint-wise and decal-wise, this is going to be a pretty easy model. But when you really start to study it, there's a lot of extra detail there that even with a plain paint scheme, hopefully it looks pretty outstanding. And then, of course, it has the intake grills going along the side and the handrails that are the grabs that will be there. So I'm sure we'll refer to this picture from time to time. So what is in store for this model? Well, a few things I've already talked about. Obviously, the dynamic brake fan up there, it's going to have to go. When we think about the panels that'll have to be patched, that one will be one. This one will be one. Some things with the skirting later on will have to be cut off. Now, the nice thing is that's a separate than the shell, and so this plastic part of the actual fuel tank and that I will have to modify on its own. But when I look at the basic model, some things I've noticed, because I did buy this used, is that I noticed that right here, both on the front pilot, the little step is broke on each. So that's one of those things that obviously I need to put that in place. When I look at the back, it just came with the regular Kato coupler. So that'll be something that I will need to, change out. I'll need to look to make sure, was there a backup light of some type and what side was it on? We'll also need to make sure that I put some kind of diaphragm on there. I just think that looks a little nicer to kind of help fill in that gap when you have multiple units lashing up. On this side, obviously, same thing, that this panel and this panel will be patched in. As we said, the fan across the top, that will be gone. And just like on the fireman side, the engineer side is also missing that same little ladder there. So some things that I can easily replace. Some of the other details that are there, some of them are molded in plastic, but those are going to be obviously shaved off, and then I'll either use the BLMA kit or the gold medal models, whichever one I have the parts for, and replace those. So that'll be something that I'll be working on from now until our February update of where things are with this locomotive. This locomotive is going to be just like the picture. It will be number 649. No real specific reason other than I found the picture of 649 and the paint scheme that I wanted. And then I also thought, you know what? I'm going to be turning 49 in just a few days. And so, yeah, this would be an okay engine to maybe celebrate my 49th birthday. So anyway, we'll continue to watch the progress. So there you have it. I had a few people ask me when I did my end of the year video, and I mentioned that I would be doing a monthly series on a Kato E-8, basically say, you know, why did you not start off with like a Broadway limited locomotive shell? And the plain and simple answer, and I don't want to get into, you know, people who, oh, I think this is a great engine or not a great engine. My personal experience is I've not had great experience with Broadway limited locomotives. The two that I've had, I ended up losing the sound board in them. I sent them back in, got them back, and in a matter of a few months, the same problem happened with them. And so when I pay as much as I did for Broadway locomotive items, I expect them to work like a charm. And instead, I was really greatly disappointed. And so I thought the best thing I could do is go with what I know. Kato locomotives, I can kind of tune it up. I can put the decoder in it that I want, which I didn't even talk about that when it comes to the building a locomotive, but I can dress it up and make it unique exactly to the railroad I'm modeling. Now, somebody had posed the question, well, would a Kato chassis fit underneath a Broadway limited shell? I don't know when it comes to the E8s. I think it was about a year ago, I did a video, and you can definitely go back to the video library and see where I took a Kato E5 chassis and put underneath a Broadway limited E6, and that worked out really well. That was no problem at all. But I don't know if the Kato chassis fit underneath a Broadway limited shell. So if there's somebody who's watching that could post that to kind of maybe help answer anybody's question, that'd be great to just let us all know. And if somebody wants to go back and rewatch that video of the E6-A, that was a Broadway limited with an E5 Kato chassis on there, like I said, it's on my video library. So I hope you'll tune in on our February to see hopefully what progress I've made on my Kato E8 build. So until then, I wish you the best, and hopefully you'll watch next month. Thank you. Bye-bye.